back for another Music Theory Bite. In this video, I'm going to be talking about non-chord tones. If that sounds like something that you'd like to learn more about, then this is the video for you. A non-chord tone, quite simply, is a pitch or note that is not part of the chord that is either heard or implied at the time that it is sounding. So, in order to find a non-chord tone, the process sounds easy enough. First you figure out what chord is being sounded at that particular time or implied at that particular time. You pull out all of the chord tones that are part of that chord, and what's left is going to be a non-chord tone. So if you take a look at the example on your screen right now, you'll see that I have a short example, 4 measures long. In the key of B flat major, I've gone ahead and labeled the chords by Roman numeral and with jazz chord symbols up top. And you'll see that B flat major chord, the tonic chord, is in the first measure, and E flat major chord, the subdominant or 4 chord, is the second measure, and F7 or dominant 7th chord, 5 chord, is in the third measure, and it returns to a tonic chord in the fourth measure. So if I pull out of the first and last measures all the B flats, Ds, and Fs, and in the second measure pull out all the E flats, Gs, and B flats, and in the third measure pull out all the Fs, As, Cs, and E flats, what I have left are all of the non-chord tones. Now it's not enough just to be able to find non-chord tones. We can label them by the specific type of non-chord tone that they happen to be. And in tonal music we have 10 of those. We typically label them based on how they are approached and how they're left. That is the type of motion that gets you into the non-chord tone and the type of motion that gets you out of the non-chord tone. We have 3 types of motion available to us. We have common tones, that is the same pitch either before or after the non-chord tone. We have steps. We can either step into or step out of a non-chord tone, or do both. And we have leaps. We can either leap into a non-chord tone or leap away from a non-chord tone. And the combinations of how we get into the non-chord tone and out of the non-chord tone are how we label our non-chord tones. So if we were to take, for example, and enter our non-chord tone by common tone, and then leave it also by common tone, we would have what's called a pedal point, which we usually label PP. It's called a pedal point because these things frequently occur at the end of Baroque organ fugues, where the organist would play a long dominant note, usually in the pedal board with his foot, and then the chords would change above that pitch. And so it was a pedal point because that was how the tone was generated. Now pedal points frequently occur as the lowest voice in a texture, but they don't have to. There are many lovely examples of pedal points in other voices in a musical texture. The important thing is that when the tone is a non-chord tone, when it's not part of the chord that's being sounded at that time, it was approached by common tone and left by common tone. If we were to take that same approach, the common tone approach, and leave it by step, we have 2 different non-chord tones that fit this definition. And the one we'll use will be dependent upon which direction we leave. So if you're approached by common tone and you step down out of the non-chord tone, we call that a suspension. So if taking a look at my example here, in measure 3 on the F7 chord, you'll see that the G in the highest voice is approached by common tone and then is left by stepping down. Again, the first note of the 4th measure, the E flat, is approached by common tone and then it steps down to the consonant D, which is part of the chord. Suspensions have a lot of other rules that go with them, and that's something that I'll cover in another video. For now, it's enough to know that a suspension is a non-chord tone that is approached by common tone and left by step down. If we go the other direction, that is, we approach a tone by common tone and we step up, sort of a reverse suspension, we call that a retardation. And we can find one of those in my example in the tenor voice in the last measure. The A on the downbeat is approached by common tone. The tenors are already sounding an A, and then that tone resolves up to the consonant B flat on beat 3. Retardations don't have nearly as many rules as suspensions do, so we simply just can label that as a retardation with the abbreviation RET. If we were to step into our non-chord tone and leave it by common tone, then we would have what's called an anticipation. So taking a look at my example again, at the end of the second measure, we have that A, which is not part of the E flat chord in that measure, but it is part of the F7 chord that follows it. So it's a non-chord tone while that E flat chord is still sounding, and it becomes a chord tone by common tone when the F7 chord starts sounding in measure 3. We call that an anticipation because it anticipates becoming a chord tone. It's as if that note is so excited to sound that it jumps the gun and is sounded a little bit early. If we were to leap into our non-chord tone and then leave it by common tone, we also call that an anticipation, although leaps into anticipations are far more rare than steps into anticipations. Now let's take a look at non-chord tones that are approached by step and left by step. We have two of those, and we will label them based on the direction of the departure from the non-chord tone. So if we have a non-chord tone that is approached by step and left by step in the same direction, we call that a passing tone. That is, it passes between two consonant tones. In my example here, you'll see in measure 1, in the highest voice, in the soprano, we go from B flat through a C, which is not part of the B flat chord, to the consonant D. It is approached by step and left by step in the same direction, so we call that a passing tone. In the second measure, we have another passing tone, also in the soprano. The E flat moves through an F, which is not part of the E flat chord, and lands on a G. It's approached by step, and it is left by step in the same direction. Passing tones can go either direction. They can go up, in this case ascending passing tones, or they can go down, we would call those descending passing tones. If our non-chord tone is approached by step and left by step in the opposite direction, we call that a neighboring tone. And I have a neighboring tone in this example in the last measure. On the B flat chord, you'll see on beat 3, the E flat in the highest voice, the soprano, is not a part of a B flat chord. It is approached from the D that precedes it, and then left in the opposite direction, returning back to that D. So we would call that a neighboring tone, and because it is going up, then back down, we would actually call that an upper neighbor tone. Likewise, in the alto voice, in the same place, we have that G, which is approached by step, and then left by going right back to that F. That is also an upper neighbor tone. We can have upper neighbor tones, and we can also have lower neighbor tones. So the direction of the neighbor tone can be specified in your identification of that non-chord tone. Now let's deal with the non-chord tones that have leaps involved in them. If you have a non-chord tone that you leap to, but then leave by step, we call that an appoggiatura. So in the first measure, in the tenor voice, we leap from the D on beat 1 to the non-chord tone A in beat 2, and then it steps back up to another chord tone, which would be the B flat. It's approached by leap and left by step, so that is an appoggiatura. In measure 2, also in the tenor voice, we have another appoggiatura, leaping from the B flat up to the dissonant F, which comes back to the E flat. It's approached by leap and left by step, usually in the opposite direction, although there are some occasions where you will leap and then step away from it in the same direction. If we turn that around and we step into the non-chord tone and then leap away, we call that an escape tone. In the tenor voice, in measure 3, we have an escape tone on beat 2. Beat 1, the tenor voice has a C, which is a chord tone. It steps up to the dissonant D, which is not a part of that chord, then leaps away down to an A on beat 3. So we would call that an escape tone. One warning about escape tones is they're actually fairly rare in music. They occur, but not all that commonly. And so if you're writing a piece of music and you want to throw in a bunch of escape tones, you might want to think twice about that. Finally, we have two other possibilities, which really are not practical possibilities. If we use a common tone to get into our non-chord tone and then leap away, well, we really don't have a name for that because it just doesn't commonly happen in tonal music. So we're going to leave that space on our chart blank. The other one, which happens very, very rarely, is if we leap into a non-chord tone and then leap away from a non-chord tone. In this case, we would call it a free dissonance. But again, this is so rare as to not even really be worth mentioning. So if you're wanting to write a free dissonance, think twice about that one. There are other ways that we can describe the non-chord tones in addition to how they are approached and how they're left. We've already run across two of those. That is, the direction of neighboring tones we can describe as upper neighbors or lower neighbors, and passing tones can be described by the direction that they go, ascending passing tones or descending passing tones. We can also describe the pitches that go into non-chord tones based on whether they are in the key or they're chromatic pitches. So we can talk about diatonic non-chord tones or chromatic non-chord tones. Finally, we can also talk about the metric and temporal placement of the non-chord tones. For example, if we have a non-chord tone that takes up exactly one beat, we would call that a metric non-chord tone. If it takes up more than one beat, we would have a supermetric non-chord tone. And if it takes up less than a beat, we would have a submetric non-chord tone. Also, the placement in the meter is important. We can have a non-chord tone that occurs on a strong or stronger part of a beat, which we would call an accented non-chord tone. Or we can have one that happens on a weaker part of the beat, which we would call an unaccented passing tone, an unaccented non-chord tone. So we have a lot of ways to describe these. A complete name for a non-chord tone could be something like metric, unaccented, diatonic, ascending, passing tone. Now, it may seem like non-chord tones are a very simple concept, and on their surface they are, but they're also a very powerful force in music. We use non-chord tones in order to smooth out melodic lines or to provide more interest in a melodic line. A nice chromatic passing tone can add a lot of energy into a great musical line. Non-chord tones are also a very important generative element in tonal music. So, for example, there are several different types of chords that started out as non-chord tones that sounded simultaneously. Most of your 6/4 chords, second inversion triads, started out as combinations of non-chord tones that just got added together in order to create a new structure. Likewise, we can think of music, in fact there's a whole paradigm for understanding and analyzing music that is based on the idea of prolongation. That is, we have chords that are composed out, and we can connect the tones of those chords by using non-chord tones, and then we can harmonize those non-chord tones to create an even deeper musical texture. So working backwards, you can start with a complete musical texture, figure out where the harmonized non-chord tones are, and those would be prolongations of chords that are sounding in there, and you can keep taking that back farther and farther until you get to the basic chord that forms the structure of the entire piece, which would be the tonic chord for that piece. That's getting a little deep into what we call Schenkerian analysis, which I'll cover in another video someday. For now, it's enough to be able to spot, recognize, and label the non-chord tones. Well, that does it for this video. If you found it helpful, please make sure you like it, Feel free to leave constructive comments below, and as always, make sure you subscribe to my channel for the latest music theory bites as they become available. Until next time.